So this is what your frame should look like to start the XE4 build. Your two bottom motor tabs should be cut off, and the two tank tabs should be cut off. These were in steps 1 and steps 2 with the plastics, should be done already. So the first step is to install the motor. We're going to put down a towel to protect the frame while we get it in there. Okay, we're going to bring it at an angle. Set it on the towel and get our hand out of here. If you just tilt it back slightly and get it over the swing arm pivot like that, and set it down like that. Now we're going to install the swing arm pivot. It'll go through the motor. It already has bushings on it. So drive that in all the way. And then we'll go ahead and put the washer and the nut on loosely. We're just going to snug this up for right now. So once we get that snug, don't tighten it too much. Now we're going to install the water pump and the tubes before we put the motor brackets on, because this is all so tight in here. So the motor should be loose at this point. It should just be kind of floating in there. Phase wires can just hang here for a minute. So you should have a water pump with a bracket and 5 silicone hoses that came with the kit. They all have the logos on it. So what we're going to do is we're going to mount the big black tube, goes on the output of the water pump. We're not going to put clamps on it right now because this is just a video to show you how to do all this. We're just going to assemble it. This goes on here. Of course it would get a clamp. So this just goes right into here. The big tube will mount to the top, and these tubes go to these pipes coming up, like so. They may have to be trimmed off to fit really good, especially the right side might need to be trimmed a bit. And we'll take this little tube, goes across the top of the 2 radiators to connect the 2. Of course, you want to have your clamps on there first before you put it on. These tubes definitely will have to be trimmed off to make this fit properly, to get down on there correctly. But you'll take 2 zip ties, and in these holes right here, feeds through the water pump bracket and goes around that small tube, and you would zip tie it to that small tube there. Okay, once you have all the hoses cut, we cut about 1 inch off the big one here on the top. We cut about almost 3 inches on the right and 1 inch on the left on this Y tube. We got our zip ties around the little tube up here, so we just kind of snug these up. They don't have to be tightened. Don't tighten them too much because you'll squish the hose. It's just kind of hold it in place. So it's all there. You'll have your clamps on, and then the only 2 hoses we have left are these bottom ones. So first we're going to put this little clamp on here. You need to put it on like that because otherwise it's going to hit your motor bracket. So this is the kind of the S tubing. I cut just a tiny little bit off the top of it, maybe like 1/4 inch. So this goes on to this one. Just kind of move this guy out of the way. Push this down as far as you can get it. And then this guy is going to come around and go on the radiator. that. And that's going to kind of just get in there like that. And then we're going to put this clamp down in here like that, because it's got to be behind this this motor bracket. So just kind of snug it up for now. Make sure the next part we're going to do is this left motor bracket. It's got to get up in here like this. So you got to make sure that clamp is back far enough out of the way. Once you're confident it's out of the way, just kind of tighten it up and we're good to go. So the next step is the motor bracket. You should have a right and a left. In the A kit, you're going to get all the bolts with it. If you don't have the A kit, you'll have to use the existing bolts you have from your motor mounts. They're the same ones, and these are too. So you can just get one of these started. Top bolt's probably the easiest, and then you're going to have to slightly lift the motor a little bit in here to get that in position. Actually, I want to get this rag out of here at this point. It's important to get that out. So you get this number 14 millimeter bolt here started, and then you get this 12 millimeter started here, and then we'll just snug these up. Don't tighten them up too much. Just want to get them snug because we still have a motor mount to go on the other side. So the motor is kind of in place there. We've installed the right motor mount, and at this point you can snug them up. So at this point the motor should be in, your motor mount should be on and tightened down. All of your tubing for your cooling system should be connected to the radiator, and your water pump should be installed. The next thing we're going to install is the controller. Once your motor mounts are tight, you can tighten the swing arm nut. I would use the factory torque specifications for that. So we're going to use our rag again, and we're going to put it on top of the shock just to protect it. We're going to take our controller, which is mounted in the bracket, should already have your fan shroud attached to it, and the wiring should be, doesn't necessarily have to be on it, but it can be. So this just goes up under here, and we're going to attach these two frame bolts right here. These should be probably 5 millimeters that came out of the little tiny bracket that was on your bike. These are in fact 6 millimeters because we've tapped these out to be a little bit bigger. So just tighten these down. Snug them up good. You don't have to super tighten them right now. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to connect our 3-phase wires. So your 3-phase wires should be in order. So it's red, white, and blue, starting on the right side. So take your 6 millimeter bolts that came with the controller and attach it. Next is your white. And your blue. And your blue wire goes on here. So once you have your 3-phase wires on, you want to tighten these. Just tighten them snug. Do not over tighten these. This is just copper. You will strip these out super easily. So I'd say maybe give it maybe 5 pounds of torque. Just so they're tightened down. They have lock washers on it, so they shouldn't come off. I've never had an issue with them coming loose. So that's done there. Your phase wires are connected. The next step is putting the battery sleeve into the bike. So the next is the battery sleeve, which goes into this compartment. Just slides down. It's going to be a snug fit. You got to get it around the controller a little bit. Work it down. Some of these hoses might hit a tiny little bit. You'll have to move them out of the way a little bit to get it into place. Once you get all these 4 6mm flathead bolts in here, just kind of start them all hand tight. Then you can use a ratchet to snug them up. If you want this to be watertight, you would need to use a little bit of silicone on these bolts. They do not need to be Loctited in there, only because they'd be really hard to get out of here if you have to take these out at any time. So a little bit of silicone on them would help it keep water from coming up into your battery box. This is meant to be watertight, or at least waterproof, so water doesn't come in. Even though the cases of the battery are plastic, you don't want to get water up in here while you're going through a stream or something. Okay, once your battery box is in place, now what we can do is we can connect these 4 bolts for your controller to stay up front, to stay in place here. Once you have your 4, these are 5mm round head bolts. 2 go on this side, 2 go on that side of the controller. You can remove this rag from underneath the shock and the controller bracket. The next, we're going to install these side brackets. If your kit has the taller side brackets, there's a bolt here that needs to come out. This flathead will have to come out of each side for the bracket to slide up in here, and these bolts will go back in later to lock this into place. So these side brackets have to slide up in here. There's a slot in the top of the battery case that fits up into. Once you get that up in there, you can put these 2 6mm bolts in the bottom. One goes in the front here, I can see it. Just put them in loosely. And these 2 8mm go in here where your motor brackets, where the top motor brackets. You can use the stock bolts unless you have the A kit, which comes with the bolts. But they're the same as the stock ones that came out of here. These 2 6mm are 12mm long, and they'll go into here. Okay, once you get all these started, don't tighten them up yet, just get them in there snugly. This 5mm flathead has to go on the inside of here and line up with that aluminum side plate before you tighten all these down. So. This is the bolt that installs from the inside of the battery case. It goes through that side bracket to hold everything in place. There's one on the right and the left. Just snug it up. Once you have your side bracket on the right side, you want to put this bolt back in, tighten it up. Now after you get that one in, you can tighten your side bolts on both sides and snug this up. At this point, you should have your motor installed, the brackets all tightened down, all your hoses, your water pump connected to the cooling system. Our battery sleeve is installed. Our side brackets are installed and tightened down. The controller is all snugged in there. The only thing left we have to do is some wiring, seat plastics, and radiator guards if you have them, and these kind of things. Now we can install our main battery cables. Your negative is on the right and your positive is on the left. Again, these are 6mm bolts. They come with a washer and a lock washer. These two are slightly longer than the phase wire bolts. But do not over tighten these. You will strip them out. It's only copper bus bar inside, so just snug it up to about 8 pounds. They should not come loose. There's your negative side. Positive goes on the left side of the bike. Snug it up, about 8 pounds. And next we'll do your throttle, the egg rider, and your main switch. Throttle will go on with the wire downward. The reason this is you want to set it to where when the brake is pulled, it's not hitting the back of the housing. If you turn it like this or like on the top, the brake will hit. You won't have any brake. So it has to be turned down so the brake clears this throttle. Like once your throttle is properly installed, your brake should clear it. Next, we're going to install the egg rider, which is your small display, and your on-off switch will be on the left side of the handlebars. Once you install your switch and your egg rider onto the handlebars, you can tighten them up or snug them up for now. Might want to leave them loose because you got to put your grip on and adjust them a little bit. This is generally how we set it up. You got your egg rider, your switch, and your clutch. So the next step is the wiring harness, which is super simple. It's all pretty much color coded. You have your main 4 wires coming out of your controller. You have the 12-pin red marked connector that goes to the 12-pin red marked connector on your controller, which is just for your accessories like your fan, for your water pump, which is blue here connection. So it's all pretty simple. This is the harness that we make for you. It's connected to the 16 pin, which are these two. This is your encoder, which is marked blue. You have your main power wire to your switch, which will go on the positive battery terminal. And then you have your throttle and your on-off. So your throttle is orange or yellow, and your on-off is red. So it's that simple. So we'll just connect this 16 pin. You got to line up these arrows like so, and then connect these two together by twisting these till they're snug. We have had these come apart, so make sure they're snug and good. And this will run up front. This will go through here and connect to your encoder. And then you have your second 12-pin connector for your accessories, which will go here. And this also has an arrow on it to, where is it? There it is. The two arrows connect, slides together. Make sure that the arrows are lined up on all of these waterproof connectors, because if they're not, you'll bend the pins and it's a heck of a time, or you may have to replace the whole controller, so be real careful with that. Then you get a Y connection. This will split up to your egg rider, the green, and the yellow will go to your regen, and this plugs into this larger connector here. I believe it's an 8-pin. You make sure these arrows are lined up, and those go through together. This will go up front as well. And then this one is for your Bluetooth device, which will connect in here, and you'll put in the bike somewhere. You can either attach it in the back by the controller, or you can put it up here in the shroud of the plastics. But we like to tuck it inside of the plastics. In some cases, we've siliconed it to the bracket or the controller back here. Seems to work fine as long as it's within a meter of your handlebars where you would put your phone for your display or your app. And that is your wiring harness. For the wiring harness, we should only have 3 wires coming up to the front of the bike. You have your Y cable, which is going to go to your egg rider and your regen. And then we have our throttle and our on-off switch. Now I've modified this bracket here a bit. From the factory, I believe it's something like that, and it has a loop on the bottom I've cut off just to make it shorter. And what we do is we bend these wires so that these 3 just go in there like that, and then it's mounted basically just upside down from where the factory was. And we put it back on here, kind of straighten these wires out where you want them so they're nice and clean looking. And then we tighten this down. So now you have all your wires up front that you need up front. These 2 wires here, this red one is an auxiliary. If you want to run fans, you would plug into this. And this wire, which is for your water pump, these 2 are blue. You line up the arrows. I believe that's there. And that's your water pump connection. We'll lay in here somewhere. This, when you get your plastics on, will be all bundled together, and there'll be a big zip tie that goes around to hold your plastics on right here, kind of hold all these wires into place. The bushing that you'll take out on the plastics and put in here kind of holds these wires in place there. So if you can see that, see if I can swing over there. Right here, this bushing will hold these wires up here to keep these in place. And then you can zip tie all the way back to the controller. Don't forget to connect this to your battery terminal, positive side. At this point, we're ready to install the regen left-hand clutch replacement. This is what it looks like. So we're going to just put this in here for now. We're going to attach the clutch back to the perch. I showed in a separate video how to attach your clutch cable. It's the same thing as attaching a regular clutch cable. Pull these rubber boots off, slide the cable through, attach it, and then pull it around. You can release it from this point here to get it loose enough to do that. So first of all, we'll just put this on here, bolt it on. For now, we can just get it in position temporarily. You can always adjust it later on. where you like the brake handle to be when you're riding, or the clutch, regen, whatever you want to call it. The regen mechanism itself is pretty simple. Start up on the top of the forks here and just have your wires out of the way wherever you want them, and it just snaps in here, and then it will slide on the forks. I like to slide it down so that your number plate clears this cable. The number plate's going to bolt on here. It's going to want to clear that cable. So what I do is go ahead and plug everything in, and then once you get your number plate onto these two pins, you can slide this down as far as you want. I get it down pretty low so that this cable doesn't interfere with anything up here. And then that's your regen. If you're buying this separate, you're going to have to map your regen voltages in the controller. It's pretty simple to do. But if you're buying a kit, it will come pre-programmed. Every regen may be a little bit different in voltage, and you don't want it on while your throttle is on. So if you pull this in at all while your throttle is on, it's basically going to cut it out. It cuts your throttle, so you can't use both at the same time. It's either one or the other. These two wires, these two yellow, and it's actually a little bit orange. This comes out of the Y. One side goes to your egg rider, the other side goes to the regen, or it could go to your thumb throttle. In the controller, you'll have a thumb throttle. If you want to use a thumb throttle instead of the left-hand clutch lever, you can use that. If you're buying this separate, it won't have a thumb throttle with it. You have to purchase that separately. But this, line up the two arrows right there. I don't know if you can see that. There's two arrows on there. And push that together, and that's connected. Then you're going to want to tie wrap these wires in here some way to keep them out of that spring. The only thing left we have is the Bluetooth device, which plugs into this fourth cable coming out of your controller. Again, you have the two arrows on here. Oh, that's not one of them. There it is. Two arrows on there align and push it together. This can be mounted anywhere on the bike. Sometimes we mount it back here onto the controller bracket, and then sometimes it goes, uncoil it, and it can just go inside of the ductwork alongside the battery there and into the ductwork. And that is it. That is all the wiring there is. It's not very complicated. You can't really cross wire anything. The next thing you might want to do is zip tie some of these wires together. The rubber grommet that comes holding the tank in, I believe, or the shroud too. Yeah, it's on one of the tank brackets. You're going to take off a black bracket. You're going to use the grommet, the rubber grommet, with the spacer for the plastics, and it still goes into this hole. So these wires want to be above that, so it kind of supports them in there, and they're nicely tucked. You could zip tie these to the controller, so they're nicely tucked inside behind this bar, so nothing really is viewing. You don't need any tie wraps on here. It's going to all be behind everything. Of course, this can be up front and go that way, so everything's nice and tight out of the way. Don't ever advise leaving the bike on. Never work on the bike with the battery installed or plugged in. Always take the battery out, unplug it. Anytime you're washing, take the battery out, unplug it. You do not want to touch any of these terminals when it's live. All right, the next thing we want to do is we're going to install the chain. Never want to run this bike without a load on it. Never spool up this motor without some kind of load on this rear sprocket. If you don't do it, the motor will overspin because it spools up so quickly. It can damage the motor, even destroy it. So what we do is take off this chain guard, just temporarily. And we remove it. And we're going to put the chain on, we're going to feed it around, and then we're just going to put the master clip in it. All right, once you have your chain back on and your chain guard, we put back on. So the next step is to install all your plastics, your radiator guards if you're going to add some, or at least your radiator vents. Go ahead and put your rear front fenders on, your side shrouds. You'll have two zip ties, two large zip ties in your kit. And these will go around the frame here through the plastics and hold that shroud against the next piece we're going to put in, which is the airbox cover. Before we install the plastics, we have to install the airbox cover, but this is the bracket that holds all that together. We have to install this first. Now, if you want to, you can weld a aluminum piece on here and thread it with the M6 thread. You'd have to tap it and weld it on there. We only do this on our race bikes where we want this to be super secure. We also just have a grommet or a plastic sleeve that goes on here that it's bolted to, and that all zip ties together, and it works fine. There's no issues with it. We just wanted to go ahead the one extra step and weld these little threaded pieces on here. It's not necessary. This front bracket comes with 3 bolts. There's one longer one and 2 shorter ones. Now I want to make it clear, this is with the A kit. These are all bolts that come on a 250 or 450 bike. You should have all these when you take your bike apart. Only the A kit comes with all the bolts, so you don't have to worry about getting them. If you buy a different kit, that's lesser value. They won't come with all these bolts because we're charging you less, so that you don't, if you have them, you don't need to buy them again. So the longer one generally goes in the top here, and then you have 2 shorter ones which will go into these welded on pieces. Now if you have the plastic bushings or pads, they may be nuts, or they may be a different type of bolt. They may be a 5mm or a 4mm. They may be different. These happen to be 6mm that we use, and we just tighten these on here. This one gets tightened on, and then your hinge needs to be partially open. This is a lock, so when your airbox is opened or swap your battery out, it automatically locks in the upright position. Just lift it up a little bit, release the lock, and lower it, and it would snap down. Don't snap this down until you have the airbox cover on here, because it's so hard, it snaps this and closes this. You won't be able to get this open unless you use a crescent wrench or something on here, and you could damage this hinge. And this is an expensive part because it's so complicated and there's so many moving pieces in it. So there's the locking. To release it, you just shut that down. So right now we're just going to be in this position so we can get the airbox cover and get the bolts through. That's our next step. All right, using a 4mm Allen wrench, we're going to put the airbox cover on here, and we're going to get one of these lined up. We start it on here. We'll just get it snugged in there a little bit so this moves around so we can get the next one in. There's 4 bolts, come with the kit. Again, if you didn't buy the A kit, possibility that this part does not come with it. You have to buy it separately, or you can use your original airbox cover if you wish. This is custom designed for our quick swap system. Now we can release the lock, and right about this point, it's going to require some pressure to push it down. It's not want to go. It's snaps down. And once it's down, it's locked shut. It's not coming up until you really pull it up. Underneath these two parts of the airbox cover, in this slot right here, are two pads to grab, or your fingers can go against, to lift this up. You want to use both hands to lift it up. It locks in place. Close it, release the lock, snap it down, open it, both hands, up, and the lock locks it. Simple as that. Battery latch opens and moves up forward like that. There is a little bit of room of play in this, because if your handlebars come around and hit it, it will move. It won't break everything. So try to keep your handlebars straight. So the next step, again, should have gone with this first. Then your plastics go on, your shrouds will go on. You have two bolts here, a third bolt here, and then your bushing goes in. So you have 4 bolts on each shroud. Then your zip tie goes through this hole here and around this part of the frame, and zip tie these both sides tight. All of your wiring go up the left side of the bike. When we do a seat video, we will show you how to cut this seat pan off and use this custom Seat Concepts seat cover that comes with the A kit. Goes on your seat pan. You would drill a hole in the pan 1 inch back, dead center. We will give you a new seat retainer and bolt and a nut that goes on the inside before you put your foam and your cover back on. But this mounts exactly like you would mount your traditional seat. It slides up into that slot here. Your bolts will still go through your seat, through the plastics back here. So this all fits in nicely. When you close your battery lock, your seat comes down. Should be a pretty close fit to where it needs to be. Got to add oil to the bike. We take the oil out after testing it, so there's no oil in it. You have to put oil. We use synthetic, full synthetic, 1030 or 530. 12 ounces of oil goes in the transfer case on the other side, and you have to add liquid to the radiators. We've been using engine ice. Do not use water. Will not cool the motor enough. So that's the installation of the motor, the controller, your battery box, or sleeve I call it. Just for video purposes, we've installed the battery. There's a gauge on the battery. If you push it, it'll show the voltage. See if I can get that in there. It will go off after a few seconds automatically. It will show the percentage. We like to show the voltage on it. So just to show you the cables, of course, red is positive, black is negative. You cannot get the two mixed up. Do not cross them. If you cross these, everything will go up in smoke, and it's not pretty smoke. So never cross these. When you're putting the cables on, the first one goes on. You do not want to put these cables on slowly. You don't want to sit there and just slow, because you'll get arcing in the connections. The capacitors in the controller require power, so they're going to take power to charge those up instantly. So what you want to do is get it lined up and just get it on there quickly. So if these are not down, this will not close. These have to be seated down. So then your battery lock comes down. The cables need to be fairly snug in there. This cable will be in the plastic later on, but for now we'll just leave it there. And then release your lock. If you remove these locks from these connectors, these are there to keep these on. If these come off during your ride, it's like shutting the bike off. So we do not recommend that you remove these locks.